You've seen it 1,000 times without ever really seeing it. A man behind a mahogany bar in a basement in Boston, rag in one hand, glass in the other, wiping in slow circles while a customer talks about his ex-wife or his boss or the weather. For 11 seasons, across more than 270 episodes, Ted Danson polished glasses that were already clean. It looked like background business, something to do with his hands. It wasn't. That rag was doing serious work no viewer was meant to notice. And when you understand why Sam Malone kept polishing, you stop seeing Cheers the same way. The reason involves a recovering alcoholic in a bar he owns, a director's trick borrowed from the theater, and one small object hanging on the wall that quietly held the entire show together. None of it is what you remember. All of it was there the whole time, in plain sight, hiding behind a laugh track and a theme song about a place where everybody knows your name. If you were watching NBC on Thursday nights in the 80s, you saw that gesture more times than you can count. You never noticed it. That was the point. Start with the bar itself, the wood-paneled walls, the brass rails polished until they caught the light, the swinging door at the end of the counter, the neon sign in the window that told you, before a single word was spoken, exactly what kind of place this was going to be. Working class, Boston, a little tired around the edges, the kind of bar your uncle might have owned, the kind you walked past in a rainstorm and thought about ducking into, and behind that counter, night after night, a former relief pitcher for the Red Sox stood pouring beers and wiping down the same stretch of oak. Here is something most viewers never thought about. Ted Danson came out of the theater, stage-trained, Carnegie Mellon, off-Broadway, the works. And every actor who comes up through theater is taught the same lesson early. When you don't know what to do with your hands, you have already lost the scene. So directors give you business, a task, something believable to do, while the important thing, the dialogue, moves through you. Bartending is one of the greatest gifts a stage actor can be handed. There is always a glass to fill, a counter to wipe, a bottle to move, a tap to pull. The work never ends, and crucially, it never demands your full attention. Watch Sam in almost any scene from the pilot forward. He is almost never just standing there. He is drying, pouring, sliding a mug across the wood, setting down a coaster, wiping the same square of bar with the same white rag. That rag was the actor's lifeline. It gave Ted Danson something to do, while Cliff Clavin explained the postal service and Norm delivered a punchline about his marriage. Without the glass, Sam is a handsome man leaning on a piece of furniture, delivering setups. With it, he is working. He is present. He is a bartender. And the more you rewatch those old episodes with this in mind, the more the whole rhythm of the show reveals itself. The talking happens on one side of the counter. The working happens on the other. Sam belongs to both. But there was a second reason the rag never left his hand, and it had nothing to do with acting technique. Sam Malone is a recovering alcoholic. This was not a subplot the writers introduced later to give the character depth. It was written into him from the pilot. A former athlete who drank his career into the ground and now owns a bar. A man who spends every working hour surrounded by his addiction. Watch him closely. He orders club soda. He turns down the drink someone slides toward him. He nurses a coffee at 3 in the morning. And when the pressure rises, when Diane is leaving, or Coach is gone, or the bar itself is threatened, his hands go to work on that glass a little harder, a little faster, a little longer. Now, whether Ted Danson consciously decided that the polishing was a coping ritual for a sober man in a room full of bottles, only he can say for certain. The show has never claimed that in an official capacity. But you cannot watch Cheers for 11 seasons and miss what the gesture is doing. Hands busy, eyes down, physical distance between himself and the row of liquor behind him. A working man in his workplace, staying on the safe side of the counter. There are episodes, particularly through the 3rd season and beyond, where Sam's sobriety comes forward as a plot point. He attends meetings, he talks about slipping, he talks about not slipping, and in the quieter episodes in between, when the writing does not name the addiction out loud, the rag is still there, doing its work. The comfort show that America put on every Thursday night was, quietly, a portrait of a man performing sobriety in the last place on earth you would choose to try. That is not what most viewers took away from it at the time. Most viewers took away the theme song, the laugh track, the feeling of walking into a familiar room after a long week. But the deeper structure was always there. The gesture solved another problem too. One the camera created. If you have never really thought about how Cheers was shot, this is worth pausing on. It was filmed on Stage 25 at Paramount, in front of a live studio audience, 3 cameras rolling at once. A warm-up comedian kept the crowd loose between takes. The theme song rose. The applause came in real time. And the set, that beautiful basement bar, was designed with one theatrical trick built into every inch of it. The horseshoe layout of the counter meant that almost every principal actor could be arranged at any moment, facing more or less toward the audience. It looked like a naturalistic hangout. It was blocked like a play. Sam behind the bar was the show's anchor point. The camera needed him there. The audience needed him there. Norm needed a bartender to complain to. Cliff needed a bartender to bore. Diane needed a bartender to fight with, and eventually, to kiss. Sam could not wander. He could not walk out of frame in the middle of a joke. He was rooted to that one stretch of wood by the geometry of the set, so the polishing gave him motion within stillness. He could stay locked in position and still look alive. The glass turned a static blocking requirement into a character trait. It is the kind of solution only theater people would have thought to reach for. Modern television, with its single camera setups and constant coverage, does not need it. Cheers did. And the strange thing is, the show almost never got the chance to develop any of this. Cheers premiered on September 30th, 1982, on NBC. It got beautiful reviews. Critics loved the writing, loved the cast, loved the atmosphere, and nobody watched. Its first season finished dead last, or nearly so, in the yearly ratings. 74th out of 77 primetime network shows, depending on how you count. On any other network, in any other era, that show gets canceled quietly in the spring, and nobody remembers the theme song. It becomes one of those beloved failures that shows up in trivia lists. A footnote in books about the 80s. Two things saved it: the critical praise and Brandon Tartikoff. Tartikoff was the head of NBC Entertainment at the time, and he was building a network out of quality first, ratings later. He believed Cheers would find its audience if he gave it time. He put it back on the schedule. He kept it on Thursday nights. He waited, and the audience slowly wandered in. By season 2, the numbers were climbing. By season 3, it was a hit. By the end of the decade, the phrase must-see TV had been invented largely to describe the block of shows that Cheers had helped anchor. There is a version of American television history, not far from ours, in which someone at NBC pulled the plug in 1983, and none of this ever happened. No Frasier, no Norm shouting his own name across the bar, no Sam and Diane, no polished glass at all. But by the time viewers caught on, something behind the bar had already changed forever. Nicholas Colasanto played Ernie Pantuso, Coach, the soft-faced former baseball manager with the gentle confusion in his eyes, the fatherly warmth, the pauses that always landed like a laugh. He was the moral center of the room. When Sam needed grounding, he went to Coach. When Diane needed kindness that was not romantic, she went to Coach. He was, for 3 seasons, the emotional oxygen of the show. Every scene he was in got a little slower, a little warmer, a little more forgiving. Colasanto was also sick. He had heart disease, a condition he had been living with for years before Cheers, and by the 3rd season he was struggling to work. The cast noticed. The crew noticed. There are stories, told in interviews over the years, of scenes shot around him when he needed to sit down, of dialogue adjusted so he would not have to move too much on camera. He kept coming in. He kept hitting his marks. He kept finding that soft, puzzled beat that made Coach who he was. He died on February 12, 1985, during the production of Season 3. He was 61. The cast was devastated. This is not dramatization. Ted Danson, Rhea Perlman, George Wendt, John Ratzenberger, Shelley Long, they had spent 3 years building something on that soundstage, and one of the pillars was gone. Kelsey Grammer, who had joined that same season as Frasier, has spoken in interviews about how quiet the set became. The show still had episodes to film. The bar had to open again on Monday morning, and nobody on that stage was ready for it. And here is the detail that changes everything. Colasanto had kept a small framed photograph in his dressing room, a picture of Geronimo, the Apache leader. It had been there since he arrived. After his death, the cast and crew moved that photograph out of the empty dressing room and hung it on the wall of the bar set, behind the counter, where Sam worked. If you go back and watch Cheers from Season 3 onward, you can see it. A small dark frame on the wall above the bar. Easy to miss in the wide shots, unmistakable once you know it is there. It stayed for the rest of the series. Every episode, every scene, every glass Sam Malone polished for the next 8 years. He polished beside a memorial to the friend they had lost. Viewers who spent 11 years watching Sam wipe down that counter were, without knowing it, watching him work next to a photograph that meant everything to the people making the show. Millions of Americans invited that photograph into their living rooms every week and had no idea it was there. That is one of the quietest tributes in American television history, and it is hanging on the wall of one of the most watched sitcoms of all time. The show had to reinvent itself, and the rag became more important than ever. The problem of replacing Coach was, on paper, impossible. You cannot recast that kind of warmth. You cannot audition a new Nicholas Colasanto. So the writers did the smarter thing. They did not try to replace him. They created a new character, a farm boy from Indiana named Woody Boyd, and they wrote him as if he had walked into the bar, from a different world entirely, and simply stayed. Woody Harrelson arrived at the start of season 4, 22 years old, unknown, walking through that swinging door for the first time. Watch the scenes between Sam and Woody in those early episodes. Sam behind the bar, Woody on the customer side, then slowly on the working side. Sam teaching him how to pour a beer, Sam wiping down the counter while Woody rambles about Hanover, Indiana, and his family back home. The mentorship that Coach had given Sam, quietly, now flowed forward. Sam had inherited it, and he was passing it on. The polishing was no longer just character business. It was continuity. Every wipe of that rag said, the bar is still open. The bar goes on. The people we lost are still with us, and the work continues. But the bar was also carrying something the writers had been arguing about since the very first episode. Sam Malone and Diane Chambers, the former jock and the graduate student, the bartender and the intellectual. Their sparring, their almost kisses, their fights that ended with a door slammed hard enough to rattle the neon sign. Every romantic comedy on television for the next 30 years borrowed something from what those two actors built on that soundstage. Moonlighting, The X-Files, Friends, Frasier itself, spun off from this very show. The template for two people who cannot stand each other and cannot leave each other alone was, to a significant degree, engineered here, in a fake basement in Los Angeles, by Ted Danson and Shelley Long. And then, at the end of season 5, Shelley Long left. Her reasons have been described different ways by different sources over the years. She wanted more time with her young daughter. She wanted a film career. The show was ready for a shift. Accounts differ, and there is no clean version of the story that everyone involved would agree on. What is not in dispute is that when she walked off that set, the show lost half of its emotional engine. Kirstie Alley arrived as Rebecca Howe, a corporate executive sent to manage the bar after it was sold, a character built specifically not to be Diane. Sharper edges, different insecurities, a completely different chemistry with Sam. And here is where something interesting happens in the show's DNA. Sam's role shifts. He is no longer the romantic lead the way he had been in the Diane years. He becomes something else, an anchor, a constant, the one thing in the bar that does not change while everything around him does. Watch the second half of the series with this in mind. Rebecca chases wealthy men. Frasier marries Lilith. Woody grows up, gets a girlfriend, runs for city council. Cliff and Norm sink deeper into their stools. And Sam, at the center, keeps wiping down that same stretch of counter. He was never really the star of his own scenes. Once you look closely, he was the still point. The glass was the tell. It kept him grounded while the show swirled around him. Every generation of viewers who came to the show in reruns, in syndication, on cable marathons late at night, met the same steady man in the same position, doing the same work. Which brings us to the last night the doors were open. May 20th, 1993. The Cheers finale aired live from the East Coast. 98 minutes of television watched by tens of millions of Americans on that single night. It was one of the most watched events in American television history. Bars across the country hosted viewing parties. Newspapers ran features about the ending. Late-night talk shows built entire episodes around it. It was appointment viewing in a way that has almost stopped existing since the arrival of streaming. And after the guest stars, and the callbacks, and the last argument between Sam and Diane, the finale ends with a scene that almost nobody talks about in terms of what it actually shows. The bar's empty. The chairs are up on the tables. The regulars have gone home. Sam is alone on his side of the counter. He walks the length of the bar in near silence, and he pauses in front of the wall behind the bar. He reaches up and straightens a small dark picture frame. Geronimo, Coach's photograph. The memorial that had been hanging there since 1985. He straightens it. He walks toward the front. Someone knocks at the door. Sam looks up. "Sorry," he says, "we're closed." That is how the show ends. Not on a kiss, not on a laugh. On a bartender adjusting a picture on the wall, walking through his empty room, and telling a stranger the night is over. For 11 years, the rag in his hand had meant the bar is open. The bar is working. The bar is still here. In that final scene, the work is done. The glass is on the shelf. The photograph is straight. The last thing Sam Malone does in the entire series is honor Coach one more time. Ted Danson polished glasses for 11 seasons because a stage actor needed something for his hands, because a recovering alcoholic needed something to hold on to in a room full of bottles, because a live audience blocking pattern demanded he stay put behind the counter, because a friend had died in the middle of season 3 and the show had to keep going, and the photograph on the wall behind him needed a witness, night after night, week after week, for the next 8 years. Because television, at its best, hides its most honest gestures in plain sight, and trusts the audience to feel them without ever being told exactly what they are feeling. Somewhere in America, there is still a wood-paneled living room with a console television that has not been turned on in a long time. Somewhere there is a stack of TV guides from the 1980s in a box in an attic, the covers faded, the schedules pointing to shows that no longer air. Somewhere there is a VHS tape of a Thursday night episode taped off the air, with the commercials still in it, a family member's voice audible in the background, asking who wants coffee. Somewhere on cable, right now, at this hour, that basement bar is open again. The neon is on. The regulars are on their stools. The theme song is starting, and a man in a white shirt, behind a mahogany counter, is picking up a glass that is already clean, and reaching for a rag. He knows exactly what he's doing. He always did.